if everybody could take a few moments to find a place that's comfortable. My name is Jim Houlihan, and some 52 years ago, I met most of you, and you look better. Nancy Cohen is here. Where is Nancy? Nancy, it's so nice to see you. Can I tell you a joke? Can you laugh for us? Oh, okay. Here are 4 chairs for 12 or 14 of you. This is quite an experience for all of us. Adlai, I know, was a big part in everyone's life. Nancy said earlier tonight that Kelly, where's Kelly Welsh and Ellen? They got married because of Adlai. Ellen, never ad-lib with a smart person. Everybody should say to the person next to him when they last saw Adlai and when they first saw Adlai, because this is a remembrance of a man who took possession of our lives in such a quiet way, such a soft and gentle way, unless you had the opportunity, like Jim Turman, to go out to Joe Davies, or unless you grew up in Joe Davies like Wayne Whalen. Adlai was alive. That was his, as Nancy said the other day, his community. And how could it not be with such wonderful neighbors and such good friends? The Fishers, Otis, Wayne's parents, maybe Wayne. Adlai had a way of capturing an involvement and a loyalty that was very unique. I thought about Joe Davies County, and I thought about a favorite poet, Robert Frost, who had written about the road not taken. And he started with 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. 52 years ago, Adlai was in the process of heading up a major reform ticket in the county. Bingo. The road diverged. Mayor Daley came out to the big rally in Libertyville, and Adlai was the candidate for the Senate. Shortly after that, Nancy Schlaze and I were hired to work in the campaign. It was a fantastic experience because of the people, yourselves, Marge Markin, Joanne Alter. He had an ability to gather wonderful people around him, which may be the most significant thing. So from a reform, independent county ticket to the head of the Democratic ticket, then in 1970, again, he had a choice. I was running for state rep. Fortunately, I was running with Dawn Netsch. And since Dawn had worked for Adlai's father, he had to endorse her, and we had a joint campaign, and I was the beneficiary. I got a little extra help. It was against the party, or I shouldn't say against the party, it was in addition to the party. And then, in 1982, he was running for governor, and he asked me to manage the campaign. That was a risky choice. And people like Durbin and Bagley and this advanced team were all young, first adventures, and now successful old men. Adlai treasured most his time in Joe Daviess County. He treasured only more than that Nancy and the kids. They were his life. He could walk away from the Senate because he had a fullness in his family. He could survive 2 devastating gubernatorial elections because he had a very supportive family. Frost concludes his poem by saying, I, Adlai, took the one less traveled, and that has made all the difference. Certainly, for the benefit of all of us and all of those who knew him, it was a great benefit. And we are fortunate enough to have a number of people who will share their experiences with Adlai. Sheila Simon, who probably knew Adlai since she was just in toddler's clothes, is going to share some of her experiences, if I can find her.
Thank you very much. Thank you. What a treat! What a treat to be sent off with a political event. Like all of us are reflexively looking at our watch. I think the crowd is maximizing. It's time to start the speaking, right? Are we all doing that? I think it's beautiful. Nancy, thank you. Nancy, where are you? I don't see. Over here. Nancy, thank you so much for inviting all of us to share in this. And thank you for getting us together at a time when it's hard to get people together. And what a great group you've gotten together here. I thank you. And I thank you for being Nancy. Round of applause for Nancy. So I'm the daughter of some wonderful parents, both of whom started off in the Illinois State House. And they loved Adlai and Nancy both. And when Mom and Dad would be together late at night after dinner, particularly with old friends, they would tell stories about the Illinois State House. Some of them would just make your hair fry. Like the Democrats stayed at the St. Nick Hotel, and the people who were on the take would get their money literally thrown in over the transom, right? Ask someone who knows what a transom is, they'll tell you. So there's that, and then there's one of the other stories they would tell would be about Adlai and the bedsheet ballot, right? Like a miracle that Adlai's elected in these circumstances. So we've got the balance of that, and I think it's no coincidence that Adlai spent so much of his life dedicated to pursuing ethics in the democratic process. So my political memories of Adlai date back a little more recently to 1986, when he was elected, as probably almost all of you know, on a ticket with a bunch of LaRouches with lovely Anglo-Saxon sounding names and minimal connection with the truth, right? And what did Adlai do? He cut connections with them right away and formed an alternate party, the Solidarity Party, to run, doomed, and yet, what a great lesson for those of us here right now, that you can't cozy up with people who are bad for democracy in order to preserve your own political power. Yeah. And Adlai never stopped advocating for democracy and for people who are running for office. And I know I was certainly the beneficiary of that often, including when I ran for comptroller, right? Who appreciates the office of comptroller? Well, maybe a former state treasurer and maybe 14 other people, 12 of whom are in the room this evening, and I thank you. So I was the beneficiary of his enthusiasm. Do it, run, Sheila, and I'll be at your fundraiser. And he always was. And he would draw like a magnet the youngest people in the room, right? My former law students were all coming up to hear stories from Adlai, and they loved it, and he loved it, and it was magic to watch. But beyond the political, beyond the impact at the state and national and international level, I think the idea that he brought us all together is a pretty big deal. And certainly for me, in that ill-fated 1986 race, he came down to a Jackson County Democratic picnic in Murfreesboro, Illinois, about 300 miles away from here, for those of you keeping track. And because it was Adlai there was a big crowd for this Democratic picnic at Riverside Park. And someone in the crowd, a young man, said, I want to introduce myself. I work for a local nonprofit organization. Here's my card. You should know what we do in this nonprofit organization. And I have to say, Nancy, that I don't recall a thing that Adlai said that day in his speech, because I was so taken with this young man. And we've been married 34 years now. So Adlai, you had an impact on the state, the national, and the international level, and you changed our lives, and we love you. Thank you.
Now we get to hear from somebody who has said everything that we think. He is a person who is so direct, so clear, and so wonderful. David Axelrod.
That's what I try to do, Jim. I try to say everything you think.
Well, you're done. You can go now.
Really a pleasure to be here, Nancy, to members of the Stevenson family and all of the friends and admirers who are here, and a lot of old friends of mine. Really great to see everyone. I had the great good fortune of covering Adlai Stevenson as a journalist, and later of working with him as a political strategist. And I can say, I don't think there's ever been a politician that I've ever encountered who's so regularly been underestimated. He was often described by the media as professorial, which in politics isn't exactly a compliment, unless you're running for like chair of the anthropology department. In 1982, we all remember, Adlai famously complained that his opponent, Jim Thompson, was making him out as a wimp, which provoked Thompson to call a press conference in which he denied that he was depicting Adlai as a wimp, a word that Thompson then repeated 100 times. And he was gleeful doing it, but he wasn't as gleeful at the end of the campaign, which finished in a virtual tie, the closest race in Illinois history. So yeah, Adlai was a little rumpled. He wore white shirts and wingtips and tortoiseshell glasses, and when he spoke, he often sounded like the son of privilege he was. But in politics and in matters of principle, he fought like the Marine he became. He was honest and fearless and utterly immune to the pressures from organized money and interest groups and machine politicians and, yes, public opinion from time to time, which, if you were his political strategist, was the source of heartburn occasionally. I mean, who else would tell reporters that he owned a Toyota here in an auto producing state? He owned a Toyota because American models couldn't compete. He tolerated political consultants, I learned, but just barely. One night at the very beginning of the 1986 governor's race, my colleague at the time, Forrest Claypool, and I visited with Adlai on the eve of an hour-long Sunday televised debate with Neil Hartigan, who was the Attorney General, who was at that time the favored candidate among party leaders. So Forrest and I felt some urgency about this. But when we arrived at Adlai's, it was pretty obvious from the jar of whiskey in his hand that he was a little more relaxed about the whole thing. And so we had this debate prep, and we got into this prep, and Adlai would nod occasionally, but it wasn't exactly clear how much of what we were saying he was actually absorbing. And to be perfectly honest, by the end of the night, after he refreshed his drink a couple of times, we weren't exactly clear what he was saying either. So Forrest and I left with this overwhelming sense of impending doom. But the next morning, we watched in amazement as a bright-eyed and chipper Senator Stevenson executed about 95% of what we'd discussed, and then added a whole bunch of wonderful flourishes of his own. And he was smart, and he was incisive, and he was good-humored, and it was basically a master class in how to dominate a televised debate. Now, it's fair to say that unlike his nemesis, Big Jim Thompson, Adlai was not a glad-hander. I don't think anybody would accuse him of that. He didn't have much patience or aptitude, frankly, for small talk. And on this, I should add that Nancy could fill any room with warmth and grace, so he had a secret weapon there, a little insulation. But he wasn't, for example, a very knowledgeable sports fan. He once overheard one of us refer to the NFL and asked, and in complete earnestness, whether that was a terrorist organization. But when he had to show some game of his own, he absolutely could. In that same campaign in '86, we got a chance to have Adlai spend an inning in the television booth at a St. Louis Cardinals game with Jack Buck that would be seen all over downstate Illinois, and it was just too good an opportunity to refuse. So on the way to the ballpark, Forrest, who was a lifelong fan of the Cardinals and baseball, gave him a tutorial on all of this. And here's the thing. If you had watched that game, you'd have thought Adlai was a lifelong fan too. But let me say, if the national pastime wasn't what excited Adlai, I'll tell you what did. Working on the problems of the state, of the nation, of the world, anticipating the demands of the future. He forecast the rise of China and East Asia long before anyone was really focusing there. And what was so impressive to me was that he regularly challenged the orthodoxies of both parties and always said and did what he thought was right, regardless of the politics. And what a powerful, powerful example that is today. How much we miss that. Honesty, honest, principled, and fearless. I'm proud to have known him, and may his memory be a blessing. Thank you.
We have a short, I believe, video from Norm Ornstein, I think I pronounced that right, who worked with Adlai on the ethics reform and was a real source of partnership for Adlai. And I'm looking for somebody who's going to turn this on.
It was one of the great privileges of my life to have worked with and known Adlai Stevenson. We met in 1976 when he took on the thankless task of chairing the aptly named Senate Select Committee to study the Senate committee system. I was a staffer and later became the staff director, and it was a thankless task because basically it meant we were going to be taking away committees, committee assignments, and jurisdictions from a number of Senate committees, moving them around. And those are precious things to senators. They're elements of their power, and there was enormous resistance. But he stood firm. We came up with a plan that was a reasonable and sensible one that streamlined the Senate for a period of time. He stood behind it, and we achieved our goals in February of 1977. We then pivoted to working on the Senate ethics process. And Adlai Stevenson almost single-handedly, with help from a few key staffers, created an ethics process and chaired the ethics committee in the Senate, which was an even more thankless task than revising the committee system. But again, did it with toughness and integrity. As I saw him work up close and got to know his family, I became more and more impressed with his intellect, his integrity, his fundamental decency. And I am proud to have maintained a friendship over the decades since, and to have watched him as he turned his efforts after his public service to doing what he could to make our political system work. And I've been proud to work with him and Nancy through the Stevenson Center in that process, and to have done events with the center as well. I have been around national politics and around the Senate for more than 5 decades now. And I have to say that while I've seen giants in that body, and while I have known a number of people for whom I had immense admiration, nobody tops Adlai Stevenson. He will be sorely missed, and may his memory be a blessing.
Les, I'm sorry to do this, but you're going to be the next speaker. Les Goldman started out as one of the junior staff people. He worked for Adlai for 7 years. Adlai sent him on a mission to work for Carter. He became a very successful lawyer, and he is still a young man. So, Les, come and share your thoughts.
Not that young.
He does look like my grandfather, doesn't he?
Looks can be deceiving. Jim, you are one of the oldest icons of Illinois progressive politics. I want to thank you for those warm and caring words. 52 years ago, fresh out of law school, when I started as body man and policy advisor in Adlai's first senatorial campaign, I really thought you were old then. Unfortunately, and Durbin saved me a little bit, now it feels like I'm catching up. To Nancy, Adlai, Lucy, Katie, Warwick, your families, a gaggle of countless grandchildren. I remember when some of you were born and you were all just little children. How you have all grown, it's unbelievable for someone at my point in life. You may or may not identify with a few of the things I'm about to say, but let me assure you that your dad and the patriarch of this entire clan was truly a wonderful person and a great American. To the rest of you, I am honored to be here this evening representing an historical bygone era, trying to do justice to a very distinguished core of Stevenson staffers. That's my mandate tonight from Nancy. Those of us who have been there know that Adlai was much more than just a boss. He was a true American Renaissance man who infused all of us who tried to keep up with him with his unheard of combination of the traditional American values of duty, humility, and productivity at a time when honor and hard work defined a man and a woman. Yet simultaneously, he had this almost childlike mischievousness that would sardonically poke fun at life's contradictions and wonders. Anyone who ever experienced that special impish grin of his knows what I am talking about. And if you look over at Nancy, she's smiling right now because she knows that better than anybody else. The duality of this psyche meant we were both on a very serious mission to make this world a better place for democracy, while we also had a lot of fun not taking ourselves too seriously. For those who listened and paid attention, this combination provided the best possible mentoring for a career in both politics and life, and a most important perspective, as Jim has already referred to, as to the difference between the two. I want to repeat that one more time, as to the difference between the two. I'm not sure my two sons think I hit the right balance on that, and I'm not sure how you all feel about how Adlai did, but for me, Adlai was the master teacher, given what you were concerned about, at striking that balance. Even those here too young, and there are many of you, to have been around at the right time, probably have some feel for the successful substantive senator: energy, finance, trade, ethics, terrorism, the environment, and even a close call with the vice presidency. A real visionary, and like his father, ahead of his time in so many ways. To present a balanced picture, however, I doubt many of you have heard of our greatest early failure being lead sponsor of energy saving, the early failure being lead sponsor of energy saving from year-round daylight savings time, which got implemented in the dead of the 1978 winter when there was no moon, with rural America leading its repeal several months later, as school buses and children going to school in pitch blackness never did mix too well. But we lived and we learned. More importantly, not as many folks were ever exposed to the fun, loving chuckle of the mischievous Adlai. My mission today is to quickly fill you in a bit more on that equally endearing side of this very special man. And I can only do a few high points, but I think they're very exemplary of a much broader trend. A great metaphor for this man's fun-loving side is the first and only cease and desist order from the Senate Sergeant at Arms to curtail intra-office Friday afternoon water pistol wars, which were resulting in leaks into offices below in our stately old Senate office building. When we moved outside around the far fountain in our courtyard, new heights of tactical brilliance were achieved. Based on Adlai, the man's military experience, let's just say he always kept a loaded water pistol in his desk to be ready for any unexpected incursions. We were truly renegades. One of the most anticipated events every year was the Percy Stevenson softball game. Let's just, oh, someone said yes. If you played in it, please raise your hand, yes. Let's just say that the focus of, and yes, the managers of both teams made the sign-stealing scheme of the Houston Astros in the 2019 World Series look tame. You had to be there. It was great fun. This list goes on and on. That twinkle in his eyes when he was trying to tell you to have fun and keep your perspective while still hitting the highest peaks of professionalism can never be forgotten by any of us. His caring and mentoring of all of us knew no bounds. And I think some of these factual issues have been referred to, or historical issues have been referred to earlier. When the opportunity arose during the natural gas shortage of the winter of 76, 77, for me to be Jim Schlesinger's key Democratic energy advisor from the Hill, to help this supposedly prickly Republican solve the crisis and create a new energy department, both of which we did. At the same time Adlai was being appointed, thank you, Norm, chairman of the newly revamped Ethics Committee, after 7 years with this man who took me out of law school and to Washington, I was very torn on what I should do. Adlai was not. He said it was an opportunity of a lifetime and he would be very disappointed if I did not grab it. Best advice I ever got. Frankly, I did worry a little bit about his still being mad about the daylight savings time debacle. But he convinced me that I could help him much more in the new Democratic administration than hanging around as chief counsel of the Senate Energy Subcommittee. And he was right, and I did. The rest is history, but I will just say that no matter what either one of us were doing, we developed this ritual of staying in touch, but a very serious ritual of every year on his birthday, either having a chat on the phone or a visit. And I'm still trying to come to grips with the fact that in looking forward to that this year, it almost happened, but fell just short. And it's something that really has affected me quite emotionally to have him not be with us here anymore. Truth is, Adlai helped us all to be better people and better professionals. The great American poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote a short poem in 1838, and we've already had some poems tonight, a song of life, which kind of captures Adlai's soul and spirit. I would just like to read you a short part of it. Tell me not in the mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream, for the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. Life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, to dust returnest, was not spoken of the soul. Not enjoyment and not sorrow is our destined end or way, but to act that each tomorrow finds us farther than today. In the world's broad field of battle, in the bivouac of life, but not like dumb-driven cattle, be a hero in the strife. Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. Let me just read that one more time. Footprints on the sands of time. That's our Adlai. Adlai, we love you. We miss you. You made us better and bask in our successes as we did in yours. And you will always be with those of us lucky enough to have experienced you firsthand, as well in the ripples that will go out through many generations to follow. Thanks for it all. You were and are the best. And on behalf of all those Stevenson staffers who were lucky enough to never forget, we thank all of you for sharing in our tribute tonight. Thank you.
Les told me he cut that short from the heart. But I have his cell phone, so I'm going to give it out to anybody who wants to call you, because in many ways, this group, all of you, for Nancy, the family, and for all of us, has to be our support going forward. Keep that in mind. Now, from the always present politician who just seems like the guy walking down the street to get groceries at Treasure Island, Dick Durbin.
Hi, Dick Durbin here. I'm honored to take a few minutes to remember my friend Adlai Stevenson. We were political partners in countless causes. I always thought about Adlai and his family that their roots ran deep in Illinois, but his voice and his service, like his father before him and even his grandfather, helped to make the United States a better country and this a better world. Outside the Senate chamber, there's a portrait of former Vice President Adlai Stevenson I. That family name has been identified with a century of service in America. While most would have buckled under the weight of such a storied family legacy, Adlai III made it his own. He served in the Marine Corps during the Korean War. He was an outstanding legislator in the Illinois House of Representatives. His thoughtful approach earned him the House's Best Legislator label by the Independent Voters of Illinois, a nonprofit group. And when he was elected Illinois State Treasurer, he could have just made it a routine post, but that wasn't the way Adlai operated. He eliminated staff patronage and he fought for racial equity. I also remember an historic Sunday in September in 1969 when the news reached us at a Democratic Unity rally at the Stevenson Farm in Half-Day, Illinois. Everett McKinley Dirksen, the United States Senator for Illinois, had died the night before. On the spot, all these politicians who were there for the rally started looking who's going to run for what. Adlai declared his candidacy for the Senate. My boss at the time, Paul Simon, made it clear he'd wait and run for governor 2 years later. Adlai went on to lead the Stevenson-Dixon-Bacalus ticket to a 1970 Democratic victory sweep. As a senator, Adlai championed government accountability and ethics. He made his Senate record by engaging the national conversation on issues of energy and national security. When Adlai stepped away from politics, he knew he wasn't done trying to make this a better world. He kept working to bring Asia and the United States closer. Through it all, Nancy Stevenson was by his side, making her own name in the world of Illinois politics. Illinois and our country will miss Adlai's presence, and I'll miss my friend.
Now, I'd like to ask Nancy, Adlai, Warwick, Lucy, Kate, the people who gave Adlai that ability to be involved in every aspect of politics, even though he was sometimes a reluctant candidate. Can you come forward, Nancy, and the family?
Gather together, there's a lot of us, we'll fill the stage.
It's not a far fall if it happens.
All right. Okay, gang.
And all the grandkids and all the great-grandkids and all the family kids and all of the neighbors from Joe Davies
And we have some cousins
and cousins.
and nephew and nieces from the west. Yeah. Who've flown a long way. So, thank you, Justin. Thank you, Andrea. Wonderful. Lovely to have. So it's quite a pile.
We call it a gaggle.
A gaggle. We're not geese.
Nancy, we also have a letter here from President Joe Biden. Dear Nancy, Jill and I are keeping you and your family in our hearts. Adlai embodied public service and love of country. I saw it up close over the course of a decade spent serving together in the United States Senate. He was principled. He stood up for what he believed, especially restoring the trust, the integrity, and the institution that governs our nation. And he was a voice ahead of his time. So many of the transformative investments in our people and the nation that we are fighting for today are the outgrowth of causes that Adlai championed. May his memory live on through you
Yeah.
your family, and all of the lives he made better. That's us. And in this country, he loved and served with honor. May God bless Adlai Stevenson III, a good man and a great American.
Very nice letter. Thank you.
Nancy, please, the podium is yours.
Well, that's a hard one to follow, and I don't like.
don't like?
Well, do I have to? It keeps me from everybody. I'd rather stand. Can you hear me? I'd rather stand to the side because I want to see you. And I think Les was saying it that. Oh, okay. I don't mind the mic so much
Okay, then come
as I mind the blockage. Les was saying that this was really about friends and workers and staff people and all the people that worked together. And I thought that we were going to have a film with a Beatles song saying, you know, it's thanks to my friends, I get high with thanks for my friends. But it is thanks to all the glorious friends that we are here today, but that made his life so special. I first met Ad because he was a Marine. He was one of 5 Marines stationed at Fort Knox, which is an Army base right outside of my hometown of Louisville, Kentucky. It was fate. And he was a very shy, very serious young man who I knew then wanted to go into public service someday. Then he went to Korea. He and his friend Carrie Line both lied for each other, trying to get into the service, not out of it, but into the service. And it had several friends killed in Korea, and he was determined to get over there and do what he could. But my view was that truce was signed as he was on the boat going to Japan and Korea, and I didn't mind at all. But Ad wrote daily letters about the devastation that he saw of war, and it helped determine him to do something about that if he possibly could. But he came home to study law, not to be a dedicated lawyer. I'm ashamed to tell you, for those of you who are dedicated lawyers, he was doing it as a foundation for public service, for running for office, and that he did. And the first one, thank you, Sheila, for mentioning the bedsheet ballot. Nobody understands what that was, but every single candidate for state rep had to run at large because the state legislature had not been able to redistrict. Sound familiar? Let's not hope that, you know, that's what happens now when they can't redistrict. So there were 200 and something candidates running around the state to try and sell their, you know, why do you vote for me? I'm one of 200 and something. Anyway, Doug Kinney, his dear childhood friend, offered to drive him around downstate, and he said he had to goad Ad to get him out of the car to wave to people because he was so shy. And imagine what that means to have someone so really shy, seriously shy, give up all of his shyness. He didn't give it all up, but to run for office 6 times statewide. So it gives you a picture of what he was trying to overcome. And one of the things that I argue with my darling friend Jim Houlihan, who the family all agreed should lead this charge tonight, because in the Senate campaign in 1970, we had a rally out at the farm, which Joe Davies County, you all know now that was a favorite place. But the campaign went on the next day, but Jim had to stay to help clean up. And who but Jim, mischievous Jim Houlihan, could corral a 12-year-old, a 14-year-old, a 10-year-old, and an 8-year-old, and a tired old wife to do the cleaning up. And in those days, it was cigarette butts. We have made some progress in this world, as well as trash. Anyway, Naughty Jim got everybody working, and we did get it cleaned up. But one of the things that Jim promised, Les promised, everybody promised, this was going to be funny. It was going to be joyous. And so I was grateful tonight to see one of the campaign staff persons came up and reminded me of the story of ads going to, in one campaign, I can't remember which, early, he made his speech at Patty Bowler's speakeasy. Well, it wasn't any longer a speakeasy, but it had been, and it had been illegal. And Bowler got up and said, you know, Adlai, you're a fine young man. We could vote for you and everything, but you just have to take that turd out of your name. So he dropped being Adlai III and became just Adlai. What are some of the other stories? When we got out to Joe Davies County, which he adored, it was with the Fishers and the Otis family decided we wanted to have some property in Joe Davies County. We looked around, we found it, we bought it together, we were partners, and as shortly after that, Ed run for state treasurer, and Leo Whalen, Wayne's father, and Esther's wonderful wife, organized a rally to welcome this new state treasurer to Hanover, Illinois, population 600 people. And the mayor of Hanover said, Adlai, if we'd known you were a neighbor, we might have voted for you. And so Hanover for us and that whole Joe Davies experience was canoe races and parades on the 4th of July and whistling wings, ducks on the Wayland porch, and the neighbors all gathering and having fun. It was for Ad, it was mowing and chopping wood and doing the things he loved, sweating, making the kids sweat, which they didn't like so much. But they're all doing things like that today, so who knows? Where was I? Now, so there were several other campaigns. You know, we have 4 to go. But one of them was to run for state treasurer, and everybody said, don't do that. It's a wasted job. It's just a nothing job. But for Ad, there was no such thing as a nothing job. And thank you for pointing it out, David, that, you know, that was really a chance to stop banks. He did not allow any of the state monies that he was in control of to be deposited into banks that discriminated. That was the time of redlining. So that was a big step. And he also gave bonus monies to banks that gave student loans that invested in businesses, particularly if they were businesses run by women and people of color. So he made the state treasurer's office wonderful, and he loved the executive ability to do things that you don't really have in the Senate when it's talk and good bills. And thank goodness we have someone like Dick Durbin who does get things done. One of the great pleasures in Ad's life was being a Marine. Not a pleasure, because it was a hard discipline, but he believed that it was a glue, people coming together with the same duties, but from all backgrounds, all races, all ethnic, all financial backgrounds, to work together. And it was a glue that he thought was essential and really was concerned that it wasn't going to happen anymore. But Dick Durbin has a bill, and Ad was enough of him there still to really enjoy the fact that Dick Durbin is working for the renewal of the Conservation Corps of FDR, and it's a fabulous program to bring together and train people from all walks of life. And it's an improvement over the original one because it's women as well as blacks that were not as included in the original CCC. So the Senate does do wonderful things when you have a senator like Dick Durbin leading the charge. But for Ad to get back to executive power was something he really cared about. So he ran twice. As you all know the results. The second one was the LaRouche campaign, when he knew that if he was elected after the LaRouches had won in the primary, that he couldn't leave the state for a minute if he had a lieutenant governor who was a LaRouche person. So he resigned. He got the Solidarity Party. Thank you, Sheila, for talking about that. And thank you, Jane Spergel, who's here, and Kathy Howlett, whose husband, Mike, now sadly no longer with us. Mike ran for lieutenant governor, Jane for the treasurer, and it was an impossible job, but they still got 40% of the vote, in spite of the fact that he had stepped out of the Democratic Party. So it was a big effort, but I never once heard he certainly was disappointed. He wanted to be governor, but he never said, it's not worth the effort. And I've gone on much too long. Jim promised me that he would give me monkey ears if I just went on and on to get me off the stage. So my role is to really thank you all for coming. Thank you all for doing all that you did to make his life so worthwhile. Thank you for the work. Thank you for the dreams of equity, conservation, saving the air and the sky and the ground. Thank you for doing things that he cared desperately about, and continuing and remembering that none of it has been accomplished, may never be accomplished, but every step that you take along the way is a step in the right direction, if you continue to believe that it's worth doing and worth the effort. So thank you for being here. And Ad would have loved tonight for seeing you all and embracing you, in spite of everything that people said about his being shy and off-putting and a little bit distant. He loved his staffs. He loved the street kind of conversations. He loved small coffees when you could answer questions. And he also did not love people who stood up and talked too long, like me. And he did not like the making of the speeches, and he would say, this is bad because it's all about me. And now is the time for everybody to talk and have fun, and there's food out there, and there's bars there and there. And please enjoy, and thank you for being here. He loved you.
What would you think?